The quiet between thoughts. Dr. Elise Voss had spent 11 years studying the human mind and had never once doubted her own. That was perhaps the first mistake. She was a cognitive psychologist at Hartwell Institute, a clean, well-lit place full of clean, well-lit people who believed that the mind was a system and that systems could be understood. She believed this too. She had built her career on it. She specialized in something called intrusive thought disorder, the condition where the mind generates unwanted images, words, or impulses that the thinker does not want and cannot stop. Not dangerous, she always told her patients. Just noise, static on the line. The thoughts are not you. She had never had one herself. Until the Tuesday in October, when she was sitting in her office reviewing case notes, and she thought, with sudden and absolute clarity, "There is someone standing behind me." She turned. The office was empty. Of course, it was empty. She was alone. The door was closed, and she had excellent peripheral vision. She noted it in the margin of her case file. Just a word, observation, and went back to work. It happened again on Thursday. Same thought, same clarity. Someone behind me. She turned. Nothing. On Friday it happened 3 times. She began keeping a log. This was a professional reflex. She was a researcher before she was a clinician, and researchers document anomalies rather than dismiss them. By the end of the 2nd week, she had 14 entries. The thought always came in the same form, not a fear, not an image, but a statement of fact delivered by some part of her mind that seemed to believe it absolutely. There is someone standing behind me. She consulted the literature. Intrusive thoughts of this type, presence hallucinations they were called, were well documented, associated with certain sleep disorders, certain neurological events, certain, and here she paused, certain early-stage conditions she did not want to think about yet. She was 41. She slept well. She had no family history of anything concerning. She made an appointment with her own doctor and said nothing about it. November arrived, and the thought changed. Not the words. Those stayed the same. What changed was the quality of the certainty. Before, she had been able to note the thought and dismiss it with the practiced ease of someone who understood the mechanisms of irrational cognition. Now the certainty had a weight to it, a density. She would think, "There is someone standing behind me." And then a half-second later, a smaller, quieter thought would follow it like a shadow. "And you have thought this before, and turned and seen nothing, and that should be enough. But it isn't quite enough, is it?" No, it wasn't quite enough. She started using the mirrors. This was not something she admitted to herself immediately. She told herself she was simply more aware of reflective surfaces, the glass partition in her office, the darkened window at night, the stainless steel of the coffee machine in the break room. She told herself she was not checking. She was merely noticing. She was checking. She was checking because turning around felt increasingly like a confirmation rather than a refutation, because the back of her neck had developed a sensitivity she could not explain neurologically, a low, persistent awareness, like a sound just below the threshold of hearing, like being listened to. Her colleague Marcus noticed something was wrong in December, which meant it had been visible for at least 2 weeks before he said anything, which meant, she calculated automatically, that the behavioral changes had been significant enough to register with an observer who saw her every day and had the social instincts of a filing cabinet. "You seem distracted," he said. in the careful tone people use when they mean something more specific. "I'm fine," she said, which was what people said when they weren't. He nodded, with the expression of a man who had accepted an answer he didn't believe, and went back to his own work. She watched his reflection in the glass partition until he looked up and then looked away. That night she reviewed her log for the first time in 3 weeks. There were 47 entries. She had not realized it had been that frequent. She sat with this information for a long time in the silence of her apartment, which was not quite silent. The building had a particular resonance at night, pipes and settling concrete and the occasional creak of the floor above, all sounds she had catalogued years ago and filed under known and benign. Tonight the sounds seemed arranged differently, not louder, not more frequent, simply present in a new way, the way a familiar face looks strange if you study it too long in a mirror. She closed the log. She thought, "There is someone standing behind me." She did not turn around. This was new. She sat perfectly still for 4 minutes. She checked the time afterward and examined this new development with the portion of her mind that was still clinical. The decision not to turn was interesting. What was it based on? Not confidence that nothing was there, not indifference, something else. She realized slowly, afraid of what not seeing anything would feel like. Because she had turned 47 times. 47 times she had turned and seen nothing, and the reassurance had lasted less and less with each iteration, until now the act of turning and seeing nothing produced approximately 0 relief and a great deal of something that felt like dread, though she resisted that word. The presence. She had begun thinking of it as the presence, which was a significant linguistic shift she noted with alarm, was becoming more real to her through the act of repeatedly disproving it. This was not how exposure therapy was supposed to work. She took a leave of absence in January. Personal reasons, she told the Institute. She needed some time. They were understanding. She had tenure. She had a record. She had accumulated more professional goodwill than she had ever thought to use, and she spent some of it now. She went to stay at her sister's house in the countryside because her sister had children and noise and a dog, and she thought these things would help. They did not help. The dog would not go into rooms that Elise had recently left, which she observed carefully and explained to herself as territorial behavior, which she half believed. Her sister's youngest, a 5-year-old named Petra, who had not yet learned the social protocol of not saying things, asked her one afternoon, "Why does the person follow you?" Elise set down her cup very carefully. "What person?" she asked, in the tone she used with patience. Level, non-committal, inviting expansion. Petra considered this with the seriousness of a child who understands she has said something significant, but not why. "The quiet one," she said, "behind you." Then she went back to her drawing, which was of a house with a sun above it and several figures in the garden, some of which were colored in, and some of which were just outlines, which meant nothing, which was a thing a child did with crayons, which was not evidence of anything. Elise went back to the city the next morning. She had made a decision. She was going to approach this the way she approached everything, systematically, empirically, without the interference of emotion. She was going to document the phenomenon with the rigor she would apply to any case study. She set up cameras. 4 of them, covering every angle of her apartment. She reviewed the footage every morning. The footage showed nothing. Her apartment was empty when she was not in it, and contained only her when she was. She reviewed 39 hours of footage and found no anomalies. On the 40th hour, the camera in the hallway produced 6 seconds of static. Equipment malfunction, she wrote in her log, inconclusive. She watched those 6 seconds 40 times. February, March. The log had passed 200 entries. She had stopped counting how often the thought came, because counting it was making it worse. A form of attentional reinforcement she recognized from her own published research, which she found bitterly funny in the moments when she found anything funny. She was sleeping less, not because of nightmares. She did not have nightmares. Because of the quality of the silence when she was almost asleep, the particular texture of it, the sense that the silence was doing something. She had begun leaving the radio on, just voices. It helped, which she did not analyze. She went back through her case files. 41 patients over 11 years who had reported presence hallucinations. She read every note she had made. She was looking for something, though she could not have said precisely what. She found it in case file 27. A man, 53, retired engineer, presented with presence, hallucinations following a minor stroke. Standard case. Resolved with medication and cognitive behavioral therapy within 8 months. Her notes were thorough, her interventions well documented, the outcome positive. But at the end of the file, in the final session notes, she had written something she had no memory of writing. Patient reports that the presence has not left. Patient reports that he has simply stopped perceiving it. Patient asks if this is the same as recovery. I told him yes. I am not certain I was right. She had no memory of writing that. She checked the date. 7 years ago. She checked her handwriting. It was hers, unmistakably, the particular slant of someone who learned to write left-handed and was corrected. She checked the patient records and confirmed the man had been discharged as recovered. He had never returned. She sat in her office for a long time. Then she thought, very clearly, very calmly, there is someone standing behind me. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt something that was not dread. She felt curiosity. She did not turn around. She had learned that turning around did nothing. Instead, she sat very still, the way she had learned to sit in her first year of graduate school, when her advisor told her that the most important skill in research is learning to be in the presence of a question without immediately trying to resolve it. She breathed. She let the presence be present. She attended to it the way she would attend to a patient, with interest, without judgment, without the desperate need to make it into something she already understood. She asked, in the silence of her own mind, "What are you?" Nothing answered. Of course, nothing answered. She was a cognitive psychologist sitting alone in her office on a Wednesday in March, and she was asking questions of her own intrusive cognition, and this was either a therapeutic breakthrough or something she needed to put in a different kind of file. But the quality of the silence changed. She could not have described how. Silence does not have qualities. She knew this. She had written papers that touched on this. And yet, there was a before and an after. The silence before her question and the silence after it were arranged differently, the way a room is arranged differently when someone has just left it, though there is nothing you could point to and say, "Here, this is what changed." She wrote in her log, March 14th, "The presence is consistent. The presence responds to attention, though not to challenge. I do not know what I am studying. I am no longer certain I am the researcher." She looked at what she had written. She did not delete it. Spring came. She returned to work. Her colleagues welcomed her back with the careful warmth of people who had decided not to ask questions, and she was grateful for this. She saw patience. She wrote. She ate lunch at her desk and dinner at her kitchen table, and slept with the radio on every night, voices murmuring at the edge of hearing. The thought still came. She no longer counted. She no longer documented. She had moved past documentation into something she did not have a professional vocabulary for. A kind of coexistence, maybe. An accommodation. She did not turn around anymore, not because she was afraid, because she had come to understand, in the slow way that understanding comes when you have been patient enough with a question, that turning around was the wrong response to what was happening. The presence was not behind her. It was in the quiet between thoughts. That was where it lived, in the half-second gap between one thought ending and the next beginning, that small, dark interval of pure mind that she had spent 11 years trying to illuminate and had never quite reached. The presence was there. It had always been there. She had simply, through the accident of 6 seconds of static, and one sentence she couldn't remember writing, and a 5-year-old's frank gaze, learned to perceive it. Whether this was a diagnosis or a discovery, she genuinely could not say. She had begun, very quietly, writing something that was not a paper. It had no methodology section. It had no literature review. It was something else. A record, maybe, of what it was like to live with a question that would not resolve, written for no one, or for someone she wasn't sure. She titled it, Notes Toward an Understanding of Presence. She told no one. She went to work and saw her patients and ate her meals and slept with the radio on, and sometimes in the quiet between thoughts, she would feel the attention of something she could not name, and she would not turn around, and she would not look in the mirror, and she would simply be present with the presence. And she would think, I don't know if you're real. And the silence would rearrange itself, very slightly, in a way she could not prove, and could not describe, and could not stop noticing. And she would go on with her day. Dr. Elise Voss continued her research for many years. She published 15 more papers on intrusive thought disorder. She was considered one of the foremost experts in her field. She never published notes toward an understanding of presence. When she retired, she left the manuscript in a locked drawer of her office desk. The new occupant of the office reported finding it, reading it, and then, after some consideration, locking it away again. They did not say why. Some questions are like that. The longer you sit with them, the less you want to resolve them. The resolution, you begin to understand, is not the point. The presence is the point. Thank you for listening to Storytime Scary Dark. If something felt familiar in that story, that quiet between your thoughts, perhaps it was meant to. Follow the channel, leave a comment, and we'll see you in the next one.